Hello everyone and welcome to this Arrow webinar. My name is Carl Connor and I'm the Forcepoint pre-sales lead at Arrow ECS, where I also form part of a larger networking and security pre-sales team covering the UK and Ireland. So a little bit about me first off. I started my Forcepoint career working for WebSense Tech Support back in 2010-2011 with some rather inspiring colleagues, and since then I've worked in both pre-sales and delivery roles for various Forcepoint Platinum partners, working with both public and private sector organisations across Forcepoint's security portfolio before finally landing my job here at Arrow ECS. My role includes enabling our channel partners and bringing new partners on board and assisting all partners where possible with a strong focus on pre-sales activities, as well as webinars. The main focus of today's webinar will be based on shadow IT, what that is, where it's come from, why organisations are concerned, and what can be done about it. We'll have a Q&A at the end of the webinar where we'll aim to answer any questions you may have or obviously take them away for further action. So today's topics in the webinar will include shadow IT, what, why and the risks, the cloud and the shared responsibility model, what does Gartner say, shadow IT potential problems, some of the key facts, some of the key questions, the Forcepoint human point, cloud access security broker use cases, web security solutions overview, obviously including CASB, and then the Q&A at the end. So first off, what actually is shadow IT, which incidentally is also referred to as stealth IT, client IT, or the latest phrase that I've heard from a trusted source, business-led innovation. I much prefer the latter. As a definition, shadow IT is the installation and use of IT-related cloud services, hardware or software without the knowledge of the organisation's IT or security department. Most users and employees are quite comfortable with technology now, and the consumerization of IT is widespread throughout organizations. This has led to fast and increased adoption of predominantly cloud-based services. Additionally, users do not think twice before downloading, installing and using cloud-based applications and services for work-related purposes without the prior approval or knowledge of the IT department. BYOD, or Bring Your Own Device, has encouraged shadow IT, and it's not only bring your own device, it's bring your own applications to the workplace, and the increasing use of SaaS applications, infrastructure as a service and platform as a service within organizations. Shadow IT, so this has grown exponentially recently, with on average 40% of all IT spending now occurring from outside the IT department. This growth is driven by the quality of the consumer apps themselves, such as file sharing apps, social media applications, office apps and collaboration tools. In 2015 there were 10,000 plus cloud apps available, but we have to go back way further than that for the start of cloud computing. The concept really started with the internet itself in the 50s and 60s with mainframes and early interconnected networks. By the mid-1990s, we saw the advancement of the internet to include personal computers rather than just business machines. But it took until the end of the century until we got our first company to offer business applications over the internet, which heralded the arrival of SaaS, software as a service, back in 1999. Fast forward 20 years and cloud applications will reportedly make up 90% of all worldwide mobile traffic. So why do employees engage shadow IT? Well, employees may discover a better application, whether that be file sharing, a collaboration tool, but more importantly, a better tool than the ones that are officially sanctioned by the business. Once they begin to use these, use of these applications becomes widespread to other members of the team and throughout the business. This is helping to fuel the adoption of the applications and cloud services within organizations. An RSA study found that nearly 40% of users bypass security or company policies just to get their job done and work more efficiently. I guess the bottom line is Shadow IT is helping to make businesses more competitive and employees to become more productive. And it's something that is to be engaged by both, but obviously the risk still needs to be managed. So what are the risks and challenges that Shadow IT brings to an organisation? Well, if the application is under the radar, so to speak, then it can't be supported and its security posture will be completely unknown. An RSA report found users often send emails to personal email addresses just to get their work done. But let's be honest, who hasn't done that? Or at least in the pre-cloud days when we could just upload it to a storage site now. These risks do expose data to networks that will often contain sensitive information or PII data, personal identifiable information. By 2020, Gartner predicts that 1/3 of all successful attacks will be against these companies' Shadow IT resources. And interestingly enough, Gartner also predicts that by 2022, approximately 60% of all enterprises will have a cloud access security broker to govern some of those cloud services. Now, this is up from less than 20% today. These same analysts also predict that the CASB market will be the biggest security market so far. Now that means a lot of revenue for partners and distributors in the cloud security market, obviously the vendor as well. So clearly the CASB market is here to stay, and that will be a strong focus within this webinar. So I think many of us, if not all of us, are now familiar with these 4-letter acronyms that make up the majority of Shadow IT. Infrastructure as a service, this is a pay-as-you-go service for storage, networking, virtualization, etc. It gives users cloud-based alternatives to on-premise infrastructure, so businesses can avoid investing in expensive on-site resources. Platform as a service, so hardware and software tools that are available over the internet. Normally a complete development lifecycle environment in the cloud, with resources that enable delivery of simple applications to more sophisticated cloud-enabled enterprise apps. Platform as a service, so really designed to support complete web application lifecycle, whether that's building, testing, deploying, managing, etc. But ultimately without the expense and complexity of buying and managing software licenses. Software as a service, so software available via a third party or service provider over the internet. These platforms make software available usually for a monthly subscription fee, and I think we've all had some exposure to these, whether it be Office 365, G Suite, Salesforce, Dropbox, or perhaps even ServiceNow. So with the adoption of cloud services and applications, as the slide kind of says really, the cloud has arrived and is clearly not going anywhere. But let's remember that many customers still require on-premise or hybrid solutions rather than entirely cloud-based. But the cloud may be a better starting point for customers if their workloads are relatively stable, or they have specific performance or compliance requirements, perhaps even limited budgets, or they just lack that hardware expertise. Hybrid infrastructures often balance compliance with affordability and flexibility for customers, and seems to be a very common enterprise IT infrastructure. So approximately 10 years ago, there was the beginning of this massive migration to the cloud. Analysts and futurists have been predicting this for a while, but it actually started happening. And once it started, as we know, there's no turning back. In many ways, we can thank Salesforce for leading the charge. They started in 1999, 5 years before consumer cloud services like Facebook even came into existence. And they saw broad adoption in the early 2000s. By 2003, ServiceNow had also hit the block. But today, O365 is the biggest player, having surpassed Salesforce in terms of adoption after just 5 years of existence. But then things got really interesting or challenging depending on your perspective when employees started going out and sourcing their own cloud services to use. 5 years ago, the average company had over 500 shadow cloud services in use, and today that number is over 1,400. When we say companies. We're really talking about large enterprises, obviously. But it doesn't stop there. Nearly every company is also using infrastructure as a service, in addition to SaaS and platform as a service. And many of those companies are running custom applications that they've built in-house on those IaaS platforms. One of the really important things to understand from an IT security perspective is that these cloud apps don't just sit on islands that are isolated from each other. They are constantly talking and sharing data with one another. O365 is integrated with Slack. Slack could be integrated with Evernote, and so on. If this wasn't complex enough, these heterogeneous mixture of connected cloud services are accessed from a variety of different networks. Sometimes the users are on-prem, but they are just as likely to access cloud from their homes, from Starbucks, or even from an in-flight Wi-Fi. And our cloud services are accessed by a myriad of different users, so mostly employees, but often also partners, customers, vendors, any third parties really. And these users may be accessing cloud from a managed device. But between most third-party users, they are just as likely accessing cloud apps from a personal or unmanaged device. Typically, OAuth-enabled applications are a convenience because they allow users access to applications using the open standard for token authentication across the internet, or OAuth. But they also include permissions to access information within the core app itself. This increases the attack surface. If these credentials were phished, they can be used to access sensitive data from file sharing and communication tools. And OAuth-enabled apps communicate cloud to cloud, so they never hit the corporate network. This is a blind spot for many organizations, and obviously a great use case for a CASB deployment, to give organizations that visibility and to give them that control. Clearly, from an IT security perspective, we're dealing with a whole new beast. This is not like the old days when your users' apps and data were all housed on-prem behind a perimeter. But this is a good thing, right? Because these services are reliable, they're cost efficient, they provide 100% uptime with things like automated analytics and business intelligence services, and they enable employees to get their jobs done anywhere, at any time, on any device. So infrastructure as a service and custom applications are the fastest growing segment of the cloud. The average large enterprise runs over 400-500 developed applications in-house. These apps are internally facing for employees, but they're also externally facing for third parties, customers, partners, suppliers, etc. Increasingly, these applications are moving to public cloud environments such as AWS, Azure, Google Cloud Compute. But the cloud offers significant advantages of scale, cost. These applications are easier to build and deploy without involving the need to engage with IT security. But the fact is, most custom applications are shadow applications. They are unknown to the business, and therefore they are not secured by IT for business use. So when it comes to the shared responsibility model, I'm sure some of you have seen this slide a few times. This is where it starts to get complex to manage. So to give you some examples of different platforms and the service providers, etc., and responsibilities. With on-premise, often data centers with lock cages, biometric authentication, perhaps 24 hours advance notice to actually get access that I've seen. The customer manages everything bar the physical security of the building and the building resources themselves. With infrastructure as a service, we see AWS EC2, we see Rackspace, Google Compute. The customers are responsible for their apps, data, and operating systems only. With platform as a service, we see AWS Elastic Beanstalk, OpenShift, Magento Commerce Cloud. Customers are responsible for the application data and the security and all of the responsibility that goes with that. Software as a service, so Google Apps, Salesforce, Dropbox, Zendesk, Slack, Office 365, G Suite, ServiceNow, and I really could go on. These are all managed entirely by the service provider themselves. Managing all of these different platforms and the applications that these businesses now rely on especially for development lifecycle, etc., is no easy task. Businesses also won't just adopt one of these platforms. Often it's a mix of different platforms based on cost and other deciding factors to make things even more complex. So this is the same slide, and it's just for fun really, but it goes to show just how complex it is for organisations or us as individuals if comparing the various shared responsibility models to simply having a pizza for dinner or as a service. So organisations, they're concerned about shadow IT, and these are some of the potential problems that businesses will be concerned around. Loss of control, goes without saying really, also leads back to the shared responsibility model. So with on-prem solutions, often secured in private data centers, nowadays data can be anywhere, often including sensitive information data. With the added worry of a data breach now being reported almost daily in the press, this is one of the biggest concerns facing businesses today. Then we have loss of visibility, so not just the data, which has now replaced oil as the biggest commodity, right? Visibility is a top issue as customers often don't know where the data is or what applications it may be residing in. BYOD or BYOA is a blind spot for many organisations and obviously a great use case. Uncontrollable or zero perimeter networks. So, legacy VPNs, firewalls, etc., MPLS, they don't provide that visibility or the security that organisations require. The introduction of BYOD, corporate devices, that could be anywhere, means that organisations simply can't control what they can't see. A risk of data breach, internally or externally really. This must keep a lot of CISOs awake at night with the increased attacks and the regulation changes such as the GDPR. This can end a CISO's career or even put a CTO inside. Not a single day goes past where we are not informed of a new breach or another large fine being dished out by the ICO for a data breach. But then we have the potential for malware and ransomware. Well, I probably don't need to say much here other than know who can't remember CryptoLocker, WannaCry, Petya. Ransomware itself has gone through some big advancements. It is now available over the dark web as a service with added support. WannaCry is still being seen today in the wild, and has left damages worldwide to the tune of $4 billion. And if we're talking about orphan data, well, I'm not talking about database relationships. It's really data there's no owner, organizations that are concerned about. Almost every organization has a data retention policy, a data security policy, and with regulations, as we know, similar to GDPR, many will have already gone through some kind of data mapping exercise. Ultimately, all data needs to be accounted for and owned by somebody, or should we say a business unit as a whole. Okay, then we have compliance and regulations. So, as we know, PCI DSS, SOX, HIPAA, the GDPR, these are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to regulation controls. May the 25th, 2018, that's a date etched in most of our minds forever. But organisations are clearly blinded by compliance. They've been blinded by regulations, and the fines for failing are big. Also within the financial impact, the IT department is accountable for unknown applications. And the IT department traditionally has been responsible and accountable for data security, governance and compliance. When workers engage cloud services without the IT's knowledge, this doesn't let the CIO off the hook. If he or she will be the first person the CEO turns to if the company suffers a data breach in one of these unseen shadow IT applications. IT ultimately has a responsibility to know where the data is and ensure that it is protected without paying for those services, multiple times. So one of the most helpful things from a market education perspective has been Gartner. They've been advising their clients for the last 4 years that CASBs, cloud security brokers, are a required as opposed to a nice to have security platform. And for good reason. Gartner also reports that 95% of cloud security failures are the customer's fault, as opposed to the cloud providers. And that's exactly what CASBs do. They help companies satisfy their portion of the shared responsibility model. So cloud providers secure the infrastructure and the applications and the OS, and the customer uses Forcepoint CASB to secure their access, the usage of those apps, and obviously the data that reside within those applications and services. So Gartner have also grouped CASB functionality into 4 pillars. The first pillar, as we see, is visibility. So you provide shadow IT discovery and consolidated views of the cloud landscape, for example. Details about which users, who accessing which data in which services from which device, and obviously having the ability to do that risk reporting and provide a shadow IT report. Second pillar, so threat protection. Preventing unwanted devices and users from accessing cloud services by providing adaptive access controls, and also with things like UEBA baked in for identifying anomalous behavior, such as brute force attacks, account takeovers, suspicious activity, etc. Also included are things like AV and anti-malware for analysis of executable files. And the third pillar, so compliance. To govern the use of cloud services, provide information to determine a company's cloud risk appetite, also to conform to data residency and regulatory compliance, and manage the security posture of the cloud control plane. So we're talking about Azure, AWS, Google Compute, etc. The fourth column, data security, is really around securing data in the cloud, both at rest and in transit. Having those adaptive DLP and granular controls, to block access based on a device, location, user behavior, or perhaps to be able to encrypt or tokenize that sensitive data within the repository. Okay, so some of the facts around shadow IT. The average large enterprise uses over 1,400 cloud services. This graph is broken down to consumer and enterprise. So consumer, obviously we're talking about things like Facebook, LinkedIn, Evernote, etc. And then we've got the enterprise services, which are Salesforce, ServiceNow, O365. As we see, at least 80% of these apps are unknown to the IT department, with on average 5% are considered to be high risk. What makes a service high risk, you may be thinking? Well, typically a CASB can look at many different security and legal attributes of a service and then provide organizations with a risk score based on all of those. These risk scores can be amended for customers who have got their own risk appetite for their own specific cloud services and apps. To give you some examples of high risk apps, the cloud service may be considered high risk because they don't encrypt data in transit or rest. They allow anonymous use of the service, they claim IP ownership, or perhaps they are just based in a high risk demographic region. So over 18% of all files in the cloud contain the most sensitive data. This is sensitive data such as PII, PHI, PCI DSS, or even encrypted data, which could be in any cloud service, right, or any application or repository. The GDPR directive requires all organizations to know where their sensitive data resides, even in the cloud. I was involved in many data discovery projects, specifically around Forcepoint solutions prior to the GDPR, and I know that this was a big concern for a lot of organizations leading up to that. But the CASB has got data discovery policies built in. It can also be integrated with the on-prem DLP suite, so more centric policies can be extended to include things like fingerprinting, perhaps machine learning, custom classifiers, even optical character recognition, and so on. All of these are a must-have for organizations that they want to secure the sensitive data, and Forcepoint has been a leader for a long time in data security. So within the CASB, you've got the data classification dashboards for application compliance. Organisations can see what data was found, what categories and regulations are involved, who owns the documents, which policies triggered the alert, and also importantly, what files have been shared publicly by who and with whom outside the business. So over 34% of all documents in the cloud are shared externally. As well as discovering sensitive data, a CASB deployment will also highlight externally shared files, some of which may have been shared as publicly accessible, for any recipient who has the link, basically. These are critical areas of concern for any organisation, and often one that you see as a more popular use case for a CASB. With the massive adoption of SaaS applications, in particular G Suite, O365, users can share links internally or externally with a matter of clicks. And this is something that I can do myself. These links again could contain sensitive info, financial, intellectual property, and can be accessible to anybody outside of the organisation. So it's a real use case to enable those collaboration controls that you get through a CASB. Almost every company today has some level of BYOD or BYOA. I personally have 2 devices. One is my laptop, one is my Android phone. But I could probably connect from more if I wish. So, I can connect from unmanaged devices using 2FA and those kind of security controls. The average user does have 2.8 devices, so you have to feel sorry for anybody that's got 0.8. But obviously this will continue to grow. So this is something that will become a bigger issue in time to come. The average enterprise experiences 17 cloud threats per month. So nearly 90% of organizations have at least one insider threat per month. But over 3/4 of customers have at least one compromised account threat every month, and over half have at least one privileged user threat per month. Quite alarming figures, but this is the reality. Out of curiosity, does anyone know which SaaS application has the highest number of insider threats? Answers in the chat window, please, but I'm afraid there's no prizes for this one. I'll give you a couple of moments. So it's actually Salesforce. Compromised accounts are very common within Salesforce. Salesforce, as we know, uses the shared responsibility model for data privacy and security. This means that Salesforce is the data processor and responsible for providing those security controls. Customers are only responsible for the integrity and use of the data, as well as the type of data being stored. Salesforce now has built-in things like health checks, that administrators can run. This looks at password information, including things like failed login, session timeouts. They have a few other features, including things like 2FA. They also have classic encryption, but that has limitations. But often these controls aren't enough, and they don't give customers that full visibility and protection against these type of threats. Vortrack, this was a malware variant years ago, which had been stealing end users' login credentials to Salesforce. It then attempted to make unauthorized logins for the purpose of stealing sensitive data. This is a great thing for a hacker, but particularly this Trojan, is probably still available for rent on the dark web as a malware as a service. In 2007, a Salesforce employee was the victim of a phishing email attack. Subsequently, a list of Salesforce customers was stolen, and those same customers were then targeted, and some of them suffered a breach as a result. It was at this stage that Salesforce implemented the security controls that we see in the platform today. The CASB UBA technology will provide alerts to brute force attacks, takeover, malicious or compromised accounts, suspicious activity by privileged users, and is a necessity when protecting against these type of cloud threats. High-risk users or important users can be monitored, and real-time monitoring provides full activity monitoring to prevent these types of incidents. So while the cloud offers many benefits to businesses and users, one nagging issue has always been data governance and data security. As businesses continue to move data to the public cloud, the growing concern is the best method for this data migration. Many businesses unable to trust outsourced IT infrastructure have now opted for other solutions like private cloud, hybrid cloud, or perhaps even combining on-premise with cloud resources. For all cloud users and organizations though, data governance is a big concern. Business users are putting their enterprise data at risk by allowing the data to travel to, these remote locations. So I guess the four main questions that businesses need to address are, should they even be using that cloud service, or is there a better application alternative available to their users? Should the file be in the cloud service? Also a very good use case for DLP. Should any of those files be shared externally? As we saw in the previous slide, collaboration requires stringent controls when data is shared with external parties. Should the file be available for download to mobile or unmanaged devices, devices that are not on the network? CASBs can provide those granular controls of the data based on the device and its location and those user activities. Blocking the download of the data on an unmanaged device, could be common practice, but can still enable access to the application so the user has access from which device, from which location. So some key questions related to shadow IT visibility and control that IT really should be able to answer. So which services or apps are the employees using? What types of apps are they? In which category? Should any of those applications or services be considered in the future for company adoption? What are the risk levels of those apps and services? So security gaps may result when an IT department doesn't know what services and apps are being used. Are there already protective measures in place, such as application control and firewalls, or perhaps web proxies that control the usage of high-risk apps, or even a CASB? Are there multiple subscriptions of the same apps or services being used? This is often referred to as app sprawl and costs organisation money. How does an organisation apply their own risk appetite for their own shadow IT, or quantify the risk of those applications? Where is the sensitive data? Is it secure? And what other cloud services are employees accessing externally, so not just within the business? What is the risk to the business from those external services and partners? So some of you may have already heard the term the Forcepoint human point system, and you may have asked yourself, what is it? Well, it's a new way to think about security in a zero perimeter world where there are few or often no boundaries. The human point system is a set of integrated solutions you can see in the slide that focus on the intersection of users and data. The advantages of the human point system is that there are multiple solutions that provide combined information security with complementary features and integrated management. Enterprise security features from Forcepoint include dynamic data protection with risk adaptive scoring, helping organizations recognize the context and the intent of their users' behavior, cuts through the noise, gets rid of all the false positives so IT know where to focus their efforts, enables secure cloud access and migration from on-prem legacy infrastructure, protect critical data and intellectual property and enable organizations to meet global compliance requirements. These Forcepoint security products are integrated and can provide organizations with the ability to understand the rhythm of its users, how users access the data, as well as the flow of the data, so where it resides, whether internal or external. To understand the rhythm of people and the flow of data, you need real-time insights that expose risky behavior from accidental, compromised or malicious users. And this is what the Forcepoint human point focuses on. So the CASB secures any cloud app, whether PaaS, infrastructure as a service, SaaS or custom apps, or even general cloud applications over HT and HTTPS. As a multi-node CASB, it can provide an AP or a proxy-based architecture, or both simultaneously, designed to work out of the box with quick policies and predefined DLP policies for data discovery. In terms of shadow IT and risk, unsanctioned adoption of cloud apps is a top security concern for large enterprise. CASB secure, they provide a secure and non-intrusive approach to cloud app discovery and risk scoring, ensuring that IT teams can eliminate blind spots, uncovering what cloud apps are used by employees and their risk profiles. These are some of the use cases that a CASB can address. So industry-leading data security, as we've heard, with predefined policies out of the box and DLP integration, preventing cloud application data leakage, and providing data discovery for that sensitive and critical information and data. Secure admin controls, monitor and apply controls to application administrators with multi-factor authentication for high-risk activities, for example. A must-have in Azure, AWS, and Google Compute. Secure and file collaboration controls, so enabling that secure collaboration with third parties, but without exposing critical and sensitive data. Intelligent threat detection, so malware detection for deep inspection to detect and block malicious executable files. Then we have location awareness, so enabling compliance with data regulations based on the geographic location of the apps and services. And then we have full user activity monitoring alerting, so providing that ultimate visibility that organizations require to ensure compliance and security across the devices, users, and applications. Okay, so from a Forcepoint perspective, applying controls to shadow IT resources. For Forcepoint web security customers, they have cloud uses and application risk reporting for free. Now, some vendors do charge for this level of reporting and control, worth noting. Application control is currently available for on-prem web security customers, but it's also roadmap for cloud web and hybrid web customers. On-prem customers can also block high-risk apps by simply ticking a tick box within the policy filter. And those on-prem customers can also black and white list specific cloud applications, as well as provide a shadow IT report for all of the apps and services in use. With web security, with cloud app control, there's also real-time auditing, control of managed devices, as well as UBA for the user behavior analytics, plus full SIEM and AD integration. And for web security, customers with the cloud app controls, plus the CASB suite itself, this fully includes auditing of unmanaged devices, the API integration that's required, data at rest controls to discover that sensitive data, and account access and security governance for the likes of Azure, AWS, O365, Salesforce, and so on. So this brings the webinar to a close, and I hope you found that useful. Please do enter any questions into the chat now that you may have, and we'll aim to answer as many of those as possible. Again, if any of you need to reach out with any questions at all, or you'd like to reach out to me or perhaps a member of the team, please feel free to contact us. We'll be only too happy to help. There's some contact information on the screen. So I'm just going to end this slide and we will go over to the questions. Thank you.